one of the interesting elements I would urge you to probe hard on both Roman and I while we're here, because we have kind of a different. Roman was in the big corporate world and then left to do the VC stuff, and I've stayed. I've done some small company stuff, but I've been mostly in the large corporate world, and it's hard to get much bigger than HP, with $125 billion a year in revenue, 360,000 employees in 157 countries. Where our annual revenue represents more than the GDP of most small countries, and that's wow. But it presents huge challenges.
But I want to add one thing. They were started in a garage.
Yeah.
In Palo Alto in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, literally. Dave Hill and Bill Packard. I mean, it's an amazing story, and many of them, Microsoft, they're all kind of that. So when we talk about innovation, it's in technology. It's technology plus the creativity. That's where you really start to get. So Roman talked a little bit about that. But so my background, I was in the wireless business for a while, and then I worked for a big telco. I worked for Sprint for many years in various capacities. Then I went to work for a company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems, which is essentially the company that invented outsourcing. So, and then we were acquired by HP about 5 years ago. So the IT outsourcing industry, and ICT, and I'm not sure how much you see that outsourcing. Is that a big deal here? The companies outsource their IT systems to.
They're starting to do it.
They're starting to? Okay. So I can share with you some what's going on in the IT industry, both from an outsourcing perspective and then just some of the disruption. And we'll probably refer to a few books too. So the first ones you want to buy, of course, are Romans.
Thank you.
And then after that, if you've got time to read after that, I usually recommend Clayton Christensen. He's a professor at the Harvard Business School. The term disruptive innovation, Clayton was the one who coined that term. He's written a series of books on it. His most recent one is called The Innovator's DNA. But the innovator's dilemma, and that's, I think I got the sense from just kind of a little bit of reading in your company that you're facing some of the same things that HP is, and that you're trying to remake yourself while running the business on a day in, day out basis. And that's hard. A lot of companies really struggle with that. At HP, we're year 3 into a 5-year turnaround. I mean, we were in trouble, and we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. We're being disrupted. We have 3 primary business units: PPS, the laptops, printers, which I see one. That's good. And over here has an HP printer, buys lots of ink. Get the stock price up. That would be appreciated. And then there's the enterprise group, which is the servers, storage. That's Peter's talking about the storage growth. We've been a beneficiary of that. And networking equipment, Wi-Fi access points, switches, routers. Sorry. And then enterprise services, and that's the group that I'm in. That's the outsourcing. The outsourcing business, the IT business, is being disrupted pretty heavily on a couple of fronts. Cloud computing, talked a little bit about that, and then the software as a service. Are you familiar with that? SaaS, you're seeing that here too, right? That's a major trend in the U.S., and that's disrupting not only the conventional IT companies, but it's disrupting the major software companies, including the monster in the house, Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, are all struggling with this mightily, and they're being disrupted and displaced in many cases by companies with the name Salesforce.com. Familiar with that? Workday. Familiar with Workday? Yeah, so these are the Concur technologies. These are companies that didn't exist just a few years ago. So one of the challenges that I use this a lot at work is that in order for us to not become Eastman Kodak, which everybody's familiar with Eastman Kodak, right? So this is a company that held the most patents for digital photography, and ended up selling them in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the majority of them, just to keep the lights on. Wow, I mean, that's one of the that you're probably going to be facing. How do you reinvent yourself while you still have to service your existing customers with the existing products and the existing services, while you remake into something new, to whatever the market is calling for, what your customers are saying, and And I'm sure the fact that you're sitting here means that you're open to new ideas. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. You wouldn't be here if you weren't wanting to challenge yourself and challenge your company. That's hard, I'm guessing. Maybe it's easy at Altech.
No, it's not easy.
No. I'm sure. Really? It's not easy. You know, you're going to, you know, to people and your either colleagues, coworkers, or even harder, some of your bosses and your boss's boss and boss's boss's boss, and say, hey, we need to do something different, and that can be, you know, culturally a bit of a challenge. But and I'm guessing you experienced some of that. Okay.
It's very difficult if you design something and then 7 years later they started implementing it as a new idea.
It's hard, but it is. There's no question that it's difficult. But I mean, I'm in the process right now of building, and you almost have what I would recommend. You try to position as building a company within the company, and I'm doing that now with a small team, going after the SaaS providers to try to understand what are their needs, how do they operate. What's happening in our business is that, you know, so we IT outsourcing. They would say, well, you manage my IT infrastructure. I don't want to do it. I want to focus on my core business of building cars or being in the paper business, whatever that might be. And so now what's happening? We just manage that infrastructure. Well, now the companies like Workday are coming in and saying, I will give you all the software you need to run human capital management, all your payroll, HR systems, performance reviews, all that, I'll give it to you as a service. Well, okay. So they either could outsource it, or if they've got their own data centers, they say, well, I'll just shut that. You know, how many servers? They say, bring the CIO in. How many servers do I have running human capital management? About 1,000. Shut them down. Well, that's disrupting our server business, right? So that's servers that, because they may or may not be using HP, and they tend, like Amazon does not buy HP servers. They don't buy IBM servers. They build their own. They probably just took apart some HP servers and IBM servers and went to China and said, can you build that for me? What happened is we lost that, we talked about the value, we lost sight of that, of what our customers wanted. And we wanted to continue to sell to them in the way we'd always been selling to them, and we've been disrupted as part of that. So we're in the process of, so I do that, you know, I can empathize, right, with trying to build a company within a company and some of the cultural challenges that you face. So I think, as Ron was saying, when we get into this, that's the kind of thing that we'd like to hear from you, and we'll share with you our experience, you know, good and bad, and maybe hopefully give you some ideas on things that you might want to consider or try in your company. But it's a chance for you to step away from the day in, day out, you know, grind of getting up in the morning and going to work and try to think about new ways. You do represent the future of the company. I mean, you really do. The fact that you're taking a shot at this is really important. It's got from what I understand, it's got a fairly rich history, and you know, and I'm sure you all want to continue to provide for your families, and if you have kids, you want to provide a good future for them and all that. So, I think that's, you know, I didn't bring PowerPoint slides. It's a joke at HP, right? Kind of death by PowerPoint. So I don't have a lot beyond that, other than to say, you know, we starting on. And hopefully you've had a chance, or you have some ideas right off the top of your head on some, like a problem statement. You know, what's a problem that you're trying to solve, and a challenge that you're facing in your department, in your area, that needs to be, you need to reinvent, whatever level that might be.
Management.
I'm sorry?
What do you need to reinvent?
That's good. So whatever that might be, whatever.
Could you perhaps share with us, Mike, on the lessons learned on reinventing HP? That's a good question. And I'm going to borrow from Meg Whitman, our CEO. I think what Meg has done an amazing job in the reinvention. First off, I would say she set realistic expectations, both with the investment community, with the employees, in terms of how long it would take. I mean, it's a huge corporation, so she said it's going to take 5 years So she set realistic and reasonable expectations, and then communicated them well to both the employees and to Wall Street, and then met those expectations. Okay, that's probably the first thing. The second thing I would say is what she did is she saw that from a cultural perspective that we'd lost our way, and I know that you're talking about the Altech way. And sometimes it sounds like sloganeering or whatever, but it is important that you have a cultural identity. And I think the bigger the company, the harder that is to build. So Meg went about rebuilding the culture, and changing a lot of HR policies, and doing things for the employees that had gone by the wayside under the previous leadership. Got back into reinvesting in R&D and making people feel important. The engagement index, the numbers had tanked. So she really set about to instill credibility from a leadership perspective, and then got that through the varying ranks of the leadership. So, one of the classes I was asked to teach at HP was on leadership, and every manager had to go back through classes on leadership, and what it means to be a leader, not just a manager. I think it was borrowed from Drucker, because I think it was Drucker that said that you manage assets and you lead people. And that there's a big difference. And then I think the third thing she did, while juggling those, that's not enough, is she cleaned up the balance sheet. So there's been some sizable acquisitions that have been made that were of questionable judgment in terms of how much was spent. So she had drained the balance sheet. So she gradually went about getting the profit picture, and that meant some hard choices. It meant letting go of a lot of people. But she did it in a way that said, look, in order for this company to survive, we have to make tough choices. And the employees, I think most of you know what goes on day in. The people in the trenches, they know what goes on in the business. If you position it properly, it's like, okay, I know to get better, I'm going to have to take this medicine that I really don't want to, but I know if I don't, it's going to be a bad outcome for us all. So I would say that's probably the third big, in my view, that's the thing that she did. So she juggled all that, and she still is. And I think our earnings come out tomorrow. My brain's a little off with we're on a fiscal year, so the second quarter earnings are coming out. And again, she's done, our stock has rebounded, if those who were fortunate enough to buy some at the depth about a year and a half ago, you would have had at this point about a 70 or 80% return on your money. Not bad. In 1 year, a little over a year. Not bad. For a company that a lot of thought was on its knees and headed into the tank. So, did that answer your question? I could long answer to a short question. Sorry.
And the innovative technological choices. Was it customer?
I think it's more customer, and I think that was part of that culture change. Is getting back to the Roman was talking about the focus on the customer. I mean, we had become this powerhouse. We have number one market share globally in laptops, number one market share in servers. I mean, and printers so there's a tendency to get complacent when you're at the top of the hill, and that hurt us. So I think getting back to the customers and then listening to them much better. But I think she realized that if employees don't care and they're not engaged, then they don't have empathy or care about their customers. You have to first care about where you are and then in order for you to care about your customers. And so she did a really good job of turning that culture around so that the employees feel a great deal more engaged and want to serve the customer and will go out of their way to serve the customer.
Mike, our previous module, which was very recently, was around people management, and we had Dr. Rika from UNI explain to us, was it 28% or 22% of people will be engaged? The rest is the challenge.
Yeah.
Is there something specific that they did to get the people engaged?
I think it was a lot. Yeah, Woodside raises, yeah. I mean, interestingly, through a lot of this, because of the financial situation, raises were not part. They did change the compensation structure around so that as you did contribute, And they did. The company brought up more stock programs, so you're invested in the future. And so as our stock grew, as the company grew, you got to benefit. You know, I know you guys were brought private, so you know. I mean, but maybe at some point down the road you go public again. But they did a lot of they got the leaders involved in a lot of programs, like, you know, charitable programs, community programs. Again, you know, a lot of times the people, they tend to go to money, right? But it's really, and changing, so they took all of the managers and put them through leadership classes to say, you know, hey, let's revisit what it is to be a good leader. I was one of the instructors. There was, just in the Americas, there were 5,000 first-line managers that went through that class, and it was mandatory. And it was, the idea was to the ones that browbeat employees, the ones that, you know, just were harsh, not, you know, didn't build a good sense of team, they were eliminated. And so.
And Mike, one question. The lady that did all this reinvention for this company, what was her title? What was she in?
Meg is CEO, which.
Okay. Because what I'm getting at is it needs to come from top management.
Oh, no, I had a feeling that's where you're going, and
Yes,
totally agree.
yes, Yeah.
Totally agree. And part of the challenge that HP had, and I don't know if you've experienced this, we have a lot of turnover at the top. And in a period of 4 years or so, we had 3 different CEOs, and each with a different view of the world, right? And they're going to drive a different agenda. I think what Meg did was very, very smart, is that I think she convinced the board that it's going to take 5 years. In other words, like, I don't want the job if you think I'm going to turn it in 2 years, right? And then she saw the issues and the people side of it. And to your point, I think, and I agree, it has to be driven from the top down. And she has to set the tone, because there's, you know, a company our size, you've got CEO, and we refer to as, I don't know if you guys do you identify the layers of management? Do you have a lot of layers? I mean, we have L1s, L2, L3. Yeah, we could have a whole nother conversation about that. But she got that, you know, she instilled it, and then had made sure it was being communicated down to the rank and file. And again, back to that management training class, leadership training class, that to get them to understand, you know, we all had to buy into her vision of what the company was going to be and how we were going to remake ourselves. I mean, if she does it, if she pulls this off, it would be the greatest reinvention story in American corporate history, the largest. I mean, it'd be even bigger than IBM's, even bigger than Apple, right? A lot of people forget, you hear about Apple now, but Apple was, you know, they fired Steve Jobs, you know, and you know, brought him back when the company was on its knees. So if you haven't read that, that's another really good book. I mean, you know, Steve Jobs was, you know, an iconic figure, and will be for quite a few years. He was also crazy, but you know, sometimes
Extremely demanding boss.
Extremely demanding. Yeah, demanding. And there was perfection, and then waste of time. This is the way Steve was. So I didn't know him, but I know people that did, and had been in meetings with him, and then they had some really interesting stories to tell.
Yeah, can I say something? With regard to innovation, I'm involved in, or have been, in the procurement of all the IT assets. I mean, talking laptops, hardware. And originally we used to buy IBM laptops before it became Lenovo. Now we've moved away from Lenovo, we moved to Dell. Now what I've noticed, you know, with innovation there has to be quality. And the biggest problem with laptops is they might become smaller, they might become bigger, they might have all the ins and outs. But if you forget about one little thing on a laptop, such as the hinge, doesn't matter what other specs you got on that laptop, you can. That's where Lenovo has gone down the tubes with their laptops. So we moved to Dell. If you look at the hinges on these Dells, you can see the difference.
HP's man.
No, just a bit of advice to try and make a point. You know what I'm saying? It's not just a case of, well, you're buying it because it's HP. You just need to have one flaw in that product, and you'll move away from that, buying that specific product.
No question.
So,
I mean, it's a constant challenge to figure out, you know, the trying to get bring innovation to the product, right? So in the case of laptops, the real disruption that's going on there is moving to tablets,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So that's put tremendous pressure on the supply chain in the laptop space, right? So because everybody wants, also wants the price to continue to come down, and it's just one of the challenges that, and Dell is, and the quarterly pressure that most, and which may speak to, I'm not sure why Altech went private, but
Altech didn't go private. Altech was bought by Altron.
well, Altron, which
Yeah,
was
and
private.
Altron is
Okay,
public.
okay.
No, Altron is public.
Oh, I thought.
Company.
Oh, okay.
And their stock's gone up about 20% in the last 2 weeks after their results announcement. In
Yes.
fact, the last week.
Went
last
up?
Tuesday was the result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Went from about 24 to about 28.
Man, I missed that one.
28.
Hey. We were in close period. Just as a matter of interest, Leon Googled Meg quickly, and she was born in 1956, people. So she's not a young leadership guru.
No.
It puts her at 58 years of age. So.
Yeah. Well, Meg ran eBay for I forget the founder's name.
But she certainly doesn't look that old in the photograph they show you. She's using technology.
I think if she stays in that job much longer, she'll probably age.
But Keith, the new 60 is 40, as we say in the United States.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, but a lot of the things that she's doing is not. Again, we talk about innovation. Is the thing that she's doing. Is not necessarily a technology transfer. She's doing a lot of basic blocking and tackling of how to run a business well. Now we are investing. One of the things that she's that HP is investing heavily in. She's reinvented in a way the HP Labs, which was a hallmark of the company. I mean, the slogan for years was invent, and that's really what put HP on the map. So a lot of reinvestments going back into the labs, and 3D printing is a big area, and that's an area, again, when you look at the opportunities, in my humble opinion, in this region, again, it's an opportunity to completely change the model and leapfrog from not just a technology, but from solving real world problems. Clayton Christensen mentioned the innovator's dilemma has a great way of putting it. He said, people think of buying a product, and he said, the best way to think is hiring a product to do a job. What are you hiring that product? What are you hiring that? What is it doing for you? Like the mousetrap thing, it's there to kill mice, right? Don't get too hung up on the contraption. Think about the end job that you're trying to get done. So I'm not sure it's beginning to get adopted, right? The gun was the most, people hear about 3D printing and they're thinking, oh, this is making a handgun great. And I don't know if that's an issue in the U.S. So it's like, oh, wonderful. We just put the technology in the hands of young people to build guns at home. Like we don't have enough problems with that.
Bullets are not traceable.
Yeah, it's just great, thanks. But what they are finding is applications, and could revolutionize some elements of medical and the dental world, where they're finding they can, as 3D printing costs come down, that they can do crowns, implants, or whatever. So imagine, right? So if you have a crown that you go to the dentist, right? It's just disrupting the technology, but it's disrupting the whole business model and the delivery of the service, right? So the dentist takes a 3D view of your tooth and sends it to the printer and boom, done.
They do that already.
They do that.
There's in Centurion. There's a.
Are they doing that?
Yeah. They take a 3D scanner of whatever dentures you need.
Right.
Within an hour, they've got all of it already.
I mean,
But I think Mike, the one cuts it out of a block. What Mike is, it's additive manufacturing. They print it down there, so there's no wasted material.
Think of it in the future. I mean, why would you go buy cups and saucers and plates and stuff? You just print your own.
The problem is the cost of the material you put in.
Right.
It's
Right.
extremely
Economies of
expensive.
scale.
right.
So currently the markup on it's about 3,000%. I know a couple of guys from Sasol, they've got some ideas to take some of the polymers and make it available into these small little modules you can use in printers. But for the next 5 years, forget the idea you're going to print so some futurist saying, hey, in 2 years time you're going to print your own shoes. It's going to be rapid prototyping, but the economy of scale isn't there yet.
Right.
In 10 years' time, you'll be able to print a spare part for a car. So you don't have to wait for it to be shipped. And it's specific in Africa. And there's a guy called Dion de Beer at the Vaal University of Technology. He's just imported a $20 million machine to print something the size of a petrol tank of a car. So he's one of the leaders in South Africa on that tech. Very interesting things the guys have been doing.
The first course I did with Da Vinci was at Stellenbosch. And when we were there, they showed us their digital 3D printing that they were doing. And they were printing for all the industries in the area, car parts, that they couldn't find or they couldn't import. And it was cheaper for them to actually print the car part with the university than for them to import it. So
It's some of the older models.
and that was in 2007 that they did that.
So one of the things that the unique opportunity that Roman was talking about before that you have here that we don't have in the U.S. is a couple of things. I think and I'm not hardly an expert on the history of technology and innovation in South Africa, but it's a pretty rich history from what I've learned over the last number of times I've been here. So you have this innovative spirit that's still here in this country, and a legacy of doing that type of work. And just to the north is this massive emerging market. I mean, it's massive. I mean, the numbers that I've heard are projections of something on the order of the population of the United States entering the middle class in the next 5 to 7 years. Some insane numbers like that. And you're positioned. I would think that you're positioned to take advantage of that better than probably anybody else on the face of the planet. Chinese are doing a pretty stellar job of getting a first mover advantage. It was the previous CEO was Mark Hurd was at a conference, and he said, well, I want to really get into the emerging markets, and I really want to get moving into Africa so I can get first mover advantage. So I had an opportunity to chat with him for a second afterwards. I said, you may fire me for this, but I think you've already lost it to the Chinese. It's not. This is like 4 years ago. It's not the end of the world. It's not too late. But TikTok, don't wait much longer.
May I just give you an interesting analogy to that, Mike? One of the companies I worked with was a company called Systemic Logic, an innovation agency, and the CEO spent. It's a small boutique consulting firm, and the CEO spent 8 weeks in China trying to figure out how financial innovation works in China. And didn't learn much other than the hierarchical control system from the top. But one of the interesting insights was he spoke to some government officials regarding China's investment in Africa. And he said, please explain to me how China can build roads and put railways down and create harbors, and no Western company which can do relatively the same technology, no one else is interested in even getting involved. They said, well, investment policy, they've looked at the medium and long-term investment case, and for the next 20 years, the roads and the railways doesn't make any financial sense, but the next 80, the returns are stellar. So these guys are building an infrastructure that will benefit not their grandchildren, but their grandchildren's children, and they will receive the benefit from it. Whereas in the West, we worry about what our results will be in the next 4 months.
That's right.
And in the next few months. And I think that is one of the major shortcomings in competing in Africa, because
Paradox.
your investment is not going to show up in the next 5
Right.
years. No ways.
Right.
But it will in the next 10 or 20.
Right.
Or well, in their case, in the next 100.
Well, and it'd be a sizable return, which is probably that's what they were recognizing.
And their view on civilization is different, right? I mean, for
Yeah.
them, it's about what the long-term future of the Chinese people will be 20, 25, 30, 50 years down the line.
Yeah, culturally, it's just.
We've missed that mindset.
I had the pleasure of working with Toyota in the mid-'80s for a little while. I'm dating myself here, but and I remember at the time sitting in some of these conferences in Toyota City, and they said their goal was to, in the next 15 years, displace General Motors as the #1 car maker on the face of the planet. And I said, I thought, this is a joke, right? And you have a 15-year plan and competitive plan, and they were dead serious, and they said, yes, we realize it's going to take this much time, and here's we're going to do this, we're going to move to this region, we're going to do that, and And they just did, I think, last year. It took them longer than they thought, but I think they did displace General Motors as the #1 car maker in the world. But they have adjusted. So what are the challenges, what are the innovation challenges that you face? Oh, you don't face any. Wow, okay. Hey, it was great meeting you.
I think it's firstly convincing the powers that be that money will be spent on R&D. I don't see anywhere in the group's budget, research and development budget, research and development expenditure. Within our own business, it's hidden in the salary bill. It's not measured in any way whatsoever. And that's not a challenge per se, but it's an approach.
Right.
Fundamentally poor approach. In our systems thinking training, we taught about these paradoxes, of which that was one. And it's very, very prominent.
And the other thing is that you keep kept into such a strict timelines on operational work that you have to do, that the time for research and development is not allocated at all.
Okay.
So you're chasing a target which is moving all the time, and there's no way for you to step out of the I would almost want to say step out of the arrow that you're aiming for and do the research to get in front of it. You don't have the time to do that.
Google's 1 day a week.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
And you get 50 megs of bandwidth that you can use in a week, and that's what you're allowed to do in the office. So the internet is there; it's available.
No, but they're changing it.
Eventually they will. But what I'm saying is that there's ways of approaching research and development, and like he's saying, there's no specific budget for it. So, and also not just money. I'm not talking about money as well, but time. There's no time set aside for you need to do research and development. And like in my department where I've got developers, if you don't allow them time to play, to get further along in their development, they just do what they do and then they leave. They don't evolve into something new or get new ideas and things like that. And that's the biggest problem in, I would say, challenge in our side, is allowing people to do research and development, to get them to actually sit down and.
Okay.
You know what I was thinking? I was busy. We had a project we had to do. Basically, we needed to get 2 smart TVs to duplicate, to mirror each other. So basically you can do that with your phones, but you can't get the 2 TVs to duplicate, to mirror each other. So what I think the biggest problem here that I'm talking just for AutoPage, is that we're not looking for opportunities that are there, sitting in front of us. At the moment now we're competing against the networks and we're finding it hard to retain our staff, and we're not looking for the opportunities that are right in front of us. That's what I'm finding now at the moment. We were talking about looking into the cloud space or other avenues. Now we know that we're sitting in a market that's already saturated. And we're finding it difficult to compete with the networks. Then we need to look at other avenues to focus on. And there's so many. I mean, just as I say, I was messing around with trying to duplicate the 2 screens, and then you can do it. I thought you could do it from the laptop wirelessly, and you couldn't. There's a if you could, there's a need for it. If there's an opportunity, then there must be a way to do it. So I mean, going a little bit further, then I would, on my own accord, I would find Samsung and say, well, you know what? Why can't the one TV talk to the other TV? Why can't I duplicate the screen onto the other TV? Why is it that I can only do it with my phone? Or, there's a need for it. We needed it.
Is that something you could build?
Not personally, but I'm sure they could. Somebody could. I mean, there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
All an app to do that.
You
Yeah.
can app to talk to.
You got this Samsung app that you can do this, what do you call it? Try and everything. You can't get two smart TVs to talk to each other, where you could actually
All you
share
need to tell me
programs.
is how much money is to be made, and I'll look at some text.
Oh, you're talking about mirroring.
So I want to take
Yeah.
two small TVs and I want to, what we've got is basically what we want to mirror stats. Now the stats works on an application. So I don't want to, and it's all got to be done wirelessly. So instead of having to put a PC there to duplicate the screen, I just want to mirror whatever on one TV to the other TV wirelessly. So we've been battling with this for,
But you've got a Samsung smart TV,
I want it mirrored onto two small TVs.
but you've got a smart TV
Yeah.
that can open a website. So
Yeah,
put the stats on the website
But
and
you can't,
browse both.
yes, but that you'll be able to mirror pictures,
No, you can put anything
video,
on the
you
website.
can't mirror the application. The application is what, so I might not be explaining it properly, but it's a little bit more complex than that.
But you get wireless HDMI cables. That you plug the HDMI cable on your PC,
Yeah.
wirelessly communicate
that.
to the
We did
TV,
that.
and it
We
can
did
go
that.
to multiple PCs.
We tried
TVs.
it.
Sounds like you two need to get together over lunch and solve this thing.
So within your organization, is there a mechanism for people to submit ideas and comments so that
There's not
management?
really, that's something that's also one of the biggest problems too. You know, you could have this kind of problem instead of us getting together in a group where we could say, okay, you know,
There was talk of an innovation, portal innovation.
We sat through meetings where the specs were drawn, the system would be built. It was due to go live in January this year, we're now into middle of May. So
My
there's
manager-
there's good intent there, Roman.
Good.
My manager
That's
drew
what
up
the
a
Innovation
spec
Cafe.
about 7 years ago.
Which FNB and FNB used to become the world's most innovative bank. Innovation Cafe, Absa Bank, Absa Capital in Africa is using it, Standard Bank's using it. So take a look at it. I think it's a cool license.
Google
get a day off to invent something, you know?
no, but all you got to do is you got to put your platforms in place. So the same way as that you have your knowledge sharing platforms with KMS systems, where people can actually contribute on your, you know, their own sites and that. That just needs to be put in place first. You need to have that to enable it and encourage it.
Does everybody agree with that? I mean, if it's okay to say, you know, I think there's in here somewhere said safe environment or ask questions. I mean,
I think we're still busy with the whole, you know, we first were in the business of acquiring businesses quite quickly, and now we're trying to synergize businesses.
Mike, I wonder if I can show a 10-minute clip.
Sure.
Which is the surprising truth about what motivates us.
oh,
as humans.
Daniel Pink, is that the surprising truth? Yeah.
Could be, and I think you should have done this in your people module, but if they missed that one, it has a direct impact on the innovative capability of
Yeah.
organizations. And perhaps just after showing the video, I'd like to find out if you think there's value in that international example for the South African one, which elements you think would be appropriate here.